Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about 4 of the most common exercise variations that contribute to a large number of chronic injuries to people in the gym. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on scaling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. In this case, I'm not going to talk about dangerous exercises. I'm going to talk about 4 exercises that are safe, at least relatively safe, because nothing in life is safe if you do them correctly. But there are variations of them that have very high rates of injury if these are done long term. And 2 of these are going to be exercises common to powerlifters, and 2 of these are going to be exercises common to bodybuilders and people interested in physique training. So I'm not going to pick on any one group. We need to discuss that. Now, the 2 big compounds that we're going to discuss are going to be the squat and the bench press. And then the bodybuilding type accessories we're going to discuss are going to be the tricep extension and the side lateral raise. Because there are variations of all 4 of these exercises that have a very high chance of damaging you if you do them for years on end. They will hurt you. And the whole point is that most of us are training to improve, not to get hurt. Now, I understand when you're at the competitive level in anything that you sacrifice health and longevity to win, because that's kind of the point of competition. Winning becomes the most important thing. And we jump over to the squats. I'm not going to go long term into the knee wraps thing, because I believe when people say, well, a lot of powerlifters have damaged knees, it's not from squatting, it's from the knee wraps. Because you guys need to remember that powerlifting isn't one specific sport. There are several different sports that all do the squat, bench, and deadlift that are thrown into powerlifting, that actually the training is not the same. They're essentially very, very different sports. So that being said, if you choose to go into powerlifting in a class that uses knee wraps, expect your knees to give out later. You just need to understand that since you chose that division, you're sacrificing your knees in the long term, and that's the choice you make. It's a choice you make to have bigger numbers. If you care about your knees, compete raw. True raw powerlifters very rarely have knee injuries. Now, the variation of the squat that causes the highest chances of knee injury is doing a half or a quarter squat. And the reasons for that, when you look at a squat, when you look at shearing stress on the knee, this has been studied. There have been multiple studies done to where they check the shearing stress. The shearing stress on the knee joint isn't low down here. It's high up here. So when you're up here, say instead of at a 90 degree, you're at a 45 degree, that is where you have the most shearing stress on the knee, right? And that's why people talk about with the knee tracking over the toe can be bad. It's actually not that bad. At the very bottom of a squat, if your knee tracks past the toe a little bit, it actually doesn't put anywhere near as much shearing stress on it as it does further up. So here's the thing. Why do people do partial squats? People say, well, they're not mobile enough. No, everyone's mobile enough. I'm sitting in a chair. If you can sit down in a chair or you can sit down in a toilet, you have the mobility to squat to parallel, or at least close to. You could squat to whatever depth you're sitting down on the toilet relative to your knees and everything else. People do it because of their egos or because they're scared to sit back, they're scared to sit down. It's either fear or ego. So a variation of ego lifting is to not squat to depth. Squatting above parallel and stopping. And what you need to remember there is that what happens when you have a heavier weight than you can squat to parallel with. Let's say you're doing, and I see this all the time in commercial gym, you'll see a guy put on 315, 405 on a bar who you know is a 250 squatter max, and he'll do reps with it. What happens when they come down? When they get right about here, to slow the weight down, because their body knows, and it knows that they cannot squat that to depth, that it's too much weight, because they could squat 250 max and they might have as much as 405 on the bar they're doing reps with. When you go to decelerate, your knees slide forward. So when we talk about that knee slide being an extra stressor on the knees, it absolutely is. It's just that it can be a manageable stress at a certain threshold. If the weight isn't too heavy and you're deep enough in the squat, it puts extra shearing stress, but not so much that you should damage a healthy knee joint. But when you're up here with it and you slide, you're having that knee slide happen at the point to where there is the most shearing stress on the knee, because it is further up here. There's an angle right up through here where it's the highest. You're exacerbating that. And then when we talk about the amount of weight on there, a lot of people have 50 and in some cases up to 100% more weight than they can squat to depth with. In other words, they have way more weight on the bar than they're capable of squatting. So what someone has done They have loaded the joints with more weight than they are actually really capable of lifting. And they're coming to a stop and letting their knees shift forward right at the point where the knee is the most vulnerable. And it's because of this practice that squats get a reputation for hurting the knees. And every person out there who has ever said, oh, I hurt my knees squatting. See, I've been around long enough, and a lot of us have been. And some people say, well, it just must be the squat. And it's the half squats. It's quarter squats that are doing it. Because every person I've ever known back in the day who I've been around the gym long term, who later, because I've known these people over the years, I've been at this a couple decades, I'm in my 40s now. All these people who I know now or later on in life said, yeah, they had knee problems or knee inflammation or damage their knee joints doing squats. Every one of them were half squatters back in the day. All of them that in my experience. And it makes sense biomechanically. So half squats destroy your knees. Check your ego at the door, reduce the weight on the bar, at least go to parallel. I'm not saying you need to go ass to grass. I squat deeper than parallel most of the time these days. I'm not saying you have to go that deep, but you need to break parallel. In other words, your hips need to go lower than the top of your knees. You don't use the top of the thigh, you use the crease in the hip. That's where you need to go because it will keep that in check and you're less likely to hurt your knees. All right, it's that simple. Bench press. Bench press. Again, a lot of people will say stupid stuff like don't touch your chest on the bench because it can create internal rotation. That's moronic. Use the right bar path. All right, what damages shoulders? How many guys out there, again, we all know these guys. I'm 41 now. I know lots of guys who talk about how they hurt their rotator cuffs or their shoulder so bad back in the day they can't bench press now. They want to get back into training again. It's because people are benching up here. They're benching above the nipple line. The barbell needs to be below the nipple. Your nipple's here. The bar should never touch your nipple or above. It needs to be at least an inch below it. In some cases more, depending upon your structure. The reason for that, the higher the bar is when you come down, the elbows flare, it causes internal rotation of the shoulder joint. Well, what happens when you put a heavy load on the shoulder joint with internal rotation? It's how you damage rotator cuffs. It's how you damage rotator cuffs. This is how guys, number one, tear rotator cuffs. Number two, how they tear pecs. The leading cause of it right here. Not saying it can't happen when you do it safely because you can get hit while driving your car down the street by following every traffic law and using your turn signals and everything else. You can get hurt. It's dramatically less likely than if you just break every traffic law and run red lights and run stop signs and run 20 miles over the speed limit. But you know what? It's cooler to do that. It's just dangerous. Same with the way a lot of guys bench. And the solution isn't to stop short because, again, you're doing a partial rep. Therefore, you need more weight on the bar to get the same chest stimulation, right? Because you're not working the hardest part of the range of the motion. You might need 50 or 60 more pounds on the bar for your 6 or 8 rep set to get the same muscle growth. So because you're now using a heavier weight, if something goes wrong and you accidentally come too far down, not only are you in a bad position that creates this problem, you just force yourself into a bad position with 50 or 60 pounds more than you're actually capable of lifting. When that happens, at least a good chunk of the first time that happens, something rips permanently. Do not ever bench above the nipple line. Ever. Do not touch your nipples or above. Never bench high on the chest. Yes, it burns more in the chest, but at a certain point, you've got to accept that extra burn you're getting in the chest isn't going to be worth it. Now, 2 exercises that bodybuilders commonly do are the variations. They do them for exactly those reasons because they feel the burn. The first one is doing laterals with your pinky up. They'll say turn it out like a teacup, right? Like you're pouring a kettle. All right, if you look at the structure of the shoulder joint, when you do that, with your thumb is up, if you look at it, there's anatomy charts on this, you'll see that the glenoid and everything is fairly protected if your thumb is up. But when you turn the pinky up, it puts part of the bone directly on the glenoid and it can crush it. And once that glenoid gets crushed, you're going to have permanent damage in your shoulder that will probably require surgery to be pain-free. That damaged glenoid could actually still be hurting you for 30 years. And the reason all these guys say, well, you do that because it burns more. All right, that's like it's a good thing. Again, because this whole mantra is, oh, you're supposed to feel a burn. You're supposed to feel pain when you train. It hurts more because it's causing damage to an internal structure. This is a good way to permanently damage your shoulder. Again, how many bodybuilders you see out there who complain about their shoulders? This is one of the practices that contributes to that over time, because every single rep that you do, you're causing a small amount of damage to a structure that doesn't repair itself easily like muscles do. And eventually, when you cause enough damage to it, enough scar tissue and calcification, your shoulders are going to hurt inside for the rest of your life. Don't turn your pinkies up. Make sure the thumb is up. If you're going to do lateral raises at all, I'm not a big fan, but if you're going to do them safely. Don't do them bodybuilder style. Remember, guys, bodybuilders are usually stupid. They usually don't know a lot about anatomy, contrary to popular belief. They generally don't. And that's a perfect example of these guys saying, oh, this burns, so the practice it burns, do it that way. It burns because it's injuring you. And that injury can permanently mess you up. And people are doing it, what? Because they're hoping they're getting a hair more shoulder recruitment? Come on. The last one is going to be when people perform tricep extensions with their elbows into the face. So get those elbows in and bring the bar to your face instead of behind their head somewhere. The reason people do that is, oh yeah, because I feel it burn down here. It's not the muscles that you're feeling it burn in, it's the connective tissue, because the way that puts the stress over the tendons that insert from the lateral and medial head into the elbow, it makes them rub against the bone more. Makes them rub against the bone more. Again, how many guys who do that sort of exercise do you see who wear elbow sleeves, who have elbow tendonitis, the way they're performing tricep extensions? If you're going to do a tricep extension, do not bring it to the face and do not keep your elbows in tight. I mean, if anything, that's absurd, because why would people be doing that? Because they're saying, well, it'll put more focus on these two heads. You mean the heads of the triceps, they get worked the most on a bench press? A closed grip bench press, a weighted dip, meaning the two heads of the tricep that probably need the least amount of extra work because they're already getting a ton of work from all your chest pressing. Those two heads, why would you need to isolate those? The long head back here is the one that probably is lagging for you so much that you're needing to do tricep extensions. Granted, it gets worked on overhead pressing, chin-ups and stuff like that a bit. So for people who do a lot of that stuff, it may not be an issue. But if you're going to isolate the muscle, why would you do a way to try to focus the most on the two heads that are probably already trained the most on all your chest presses? And why would you do so in a way that causes long-term inflammation of the tendons? That's why guys' elbows hurt. That's why guys wear elbow sleeves who've been training for years. It's specifically these tendons being inflamed from bringing the bar or the rope to your face while keeping the elbows tucked in. And if you just look at the way that it puts the stress on it, it makes a lot of sense as to why it's pulling with a downward force there and rubbing those against the bone. And like I said, long term that causes inflammation. It can cause calcification, and as soon as you get calcification on the underside of those tendons where they connect to the bone, it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt a long time. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Jason, I've already made these mistakes. I'm injured. What can you recommend to me to fix it? I can't. That's why I give preventative tips, because I do not have the knowledge or the ability to help you or make these things better once you hurt yourself. I'm not qualified to help you, so all I can tell people is don't do stupid stuff. Just like I would tell someone, practice gun safety, because I'm not qualified to patch up your gunshot wounds if you accidentally shoot yourself, right? I'm not qualified to do that. I probably can't help you once you do that, but I can tell you some basic rules to not get yourself hurt so that we don't have to be in that situation, because I can't help you once you do it. And it's the same with these things. I can't help you once you've inflicted these sort of injuries. And in some cases, even a physical therapist can't help you. You're just going to have to live with pain for the rest of your life. You messed up. So what I would say to people is better to listen to me now than to get to that point. Because like I've said before, once you get there, there's nothing I can do to help you. Sorry. But I can help keep you from doing it in the first place. And if you're already hurt, I can tell you what's causing it, why you're feeling these pains, so that you can quit doing it and hopefully not make it worse, so that you only have to deal with 50% of the pain for the rest of your life that you would have to if you keep doing these for another year. I can at least cut your pain in the long term by stopping you from further damaging these things. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.